All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
We got more college football playoffs. We have made it to the quarterfinals. What's going on, everybody? My name's Bill. Put a dollar in front of it. And welcome to the Ship It Nation CFP Quarterfinals breakdown and analysis show. We have some games to get to, but I also want to just thank everybody for watching all season long. We're coming up on the end of great NFL, great CFB seasons at Ship It Nation. And I want to take a second to remind you, we got PGA coming up right around the corner. Now, we're not done with NFL and college football. I do want to make that clear. We're still going to have great content for the rest of the bowl games, for the NFL playoffs, crummy Week 18, all the variants and everything that comes with that in the NFL, and then the national championship for college football as well. But we got some pretty big things in the hopper coming up for PGA. So now's a great time to get in. Try us out. 5 days for $19 if you like it enough. This is the place to be for PGA, but right now it's the place to be for the CFP. And over the holidays, we had some huge winners at Ship It Nation. A big $100,000 takedown for Am Bellman. And then we had Earwig with a big best ball win, Ham Hock advancing to the College Football World Championship, and just winners across the board, flying the Ship It Nation flag. Our members having a lot of success, ending 2025 on a good note. But let's get to the football. If you're watching this early enough, we haven't had this game yet. Miami at Ohio State, the Showdown on Wednesday night. Now, if you're watching this Thursday morning or real late on Wednesday, you can skip ahead or watch my breakdown. Tell me what I did right, but probably more so what I got incorrect. I know that's more fun to prod. But anywho, we're going to start with this Showdown on Wednesday night. Miami and Ohio State in the quarterfinals. Miami coming in as big underdogs, and rightfully so. I mean, Ohio State's clearly been the better team for most of the season, if not all the season. And can an ACC team hang with the Buckeyes? Carson Beck has had a much better ceiling against mid to low competition. We witnessed another poor DFS performance against A&M, and that was a good defense, and I think Ohio State's is better. And even though Miami won the game, it wasn't like we didn't find a lot with Carson Beck on DraftKings and FanDuel. So I'd say proceed with caution with him. Again, on a showdown, the quarterbacks can touch the ball almost every play. So there's definitely still a chance for him there. He hasn't wowed us. He hasn't been beneficial this entire season for the most part. Mark Fletcher in this backfield. It was pretty clear last week he was the most trusted back in this running back room. It is a tough matchup, but if there's going to be that much volume for him, I do think there's some upside at 7,000 on Showdown. And then, the one thing I do want to mention too is, we could see more Pringle and Brown rotate in to keep these guys fresher. Now that's speculation, obviously. I'm not in the coaching room. So I still do like Fletcher the most out of these three backs. And there's really 64 and 52 is not that much of a discount. Now, maybe a few $100 is going to help out your Showdown lineup enough, but yeah, you got to think about what you're losing to if Fletcher is still going to be the main back here. The wide receiver room, Malachi Toney visibly frustrated after that turnover against A&M. Now, he did have redemption with that touchdown. So while the box score doesn't look great, there was just more proof last week that they're going to try to get him the ball any way they possibly can, whether it's in the run game, whether Toney's throwing the ball or he's catching the passes on really any type of route. Toney's a guy that can run any type of route. As much of a nightmare as this Ohio State defense can be, I think Toney's just as much of a matchup nightmare for defenses. So even at 8,800, I think a guy that if you can fit him in to your lineups isn't a bad option. Definitely. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to be playing Miami captains. I think Toney would be the most popular out of the bunch, but you still might get some leverage putting him in the captain spot instead of an Ohio State guy. And then I do think we could see more CJ Daniels as well this week. He's definitely got the talent and upside. He missed some time, and the ceiling hasn't been huge since earlier in the season, but obviously, like I said, talented enough that he's certainly an option. And Keelan Marion just has continued to keep his target share, even with Daniels returning. He's been pretty solid. So maybe you get some point per reception upside, especially if Miami does need to throw the ball a lot more in this game. It's more so like the reception opportunity that's pushing me a little bit toward these guys. It's just it even in Showdown, it gets hard to play a side that only has a 15.5 point team total. After that, in terms of value, it gets pretty gross. Like Lofton is probably the best value on the Miami side and with these pass catchers just because of the amount of time he spends on the field. Trader and Moore, their snap share has been down. Like it dropped pretty significantly last week. So I don't know how much you're getting to these guys. That'd be more of an extreme dart throw. Definitely. Nice job, Bill. Probably going to get you a little bit different if you do play these guys, and it helps you fit in some of the studs on the other side. Speaking of the other side, big favorites in Ohio State. Julian Sayin, another guy he's shown more upside than Carson Beck, but he's also shown a pretty low floor. More comfortable playing him in Showdown, even at an elevated price tag, the most expensive guy on this slate, especially with the weapons he has to throw to. The one thing you do need to worry about a little bit, though, is Lincoln Kienholz will come in and snipe some touchdowns in sort of a quarterback wildcat formation. So even on the goal line, I don't know that you're going to get a ton of Julian Sayin rushing touchdown upside, but it's definitely still there. And again, on the favored team, if you're playing a quarterback, you probably lean Sayin between the two. And then, like I said, Kienholz will snipe some touchdowns here and there, so that could hurt Bo Jackson as well. But with Bo, you're just going for the volume. He's got a lot of potential here, even against a tough defense. I don't know. It's Big Ten versus ACC. I mean, Miami could stand up and be firm on defense, but just everything on paper tells me that the Hurricanes are outmatched now. Could they win the game? Certainly. But I do think Bo Jackson has a lot of potential here. But along with Kienholz, CJ Donaldson still has the capability of sniping a touchdown from Bo Jackson. So while I do think Jackson's going to get the volume, his biggest risk is just other guys taking away the touchdowns once they get inside the 5-yard line. Should that prevent you from playing him? Absolutely not. But just one of those things you want to go in eyes wide open. And then Isaiah West, I would not be surprised to see him get some run in this game too. And in Showdown, you're looking for who's that min-price guy going to be? Well, Isaiah West, if he's going to be on the field at min price, I'll take that for 1K. Even if he only gets 5 carries, if one of them happens to be a touchdown, that could easily be the difference in a game like this where there's not a ton of points expected. The wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, need no introduction. No doubt they'll be popular with the Buckeyes being big favorites and such a low point total for Miami, but you can still be different with how you play these guys. Maybe playing Sayin at the captain and pairing both of the wide receivers with him. And then obviously you have to jam in some value. But then you're looking at guys like Max Clare, Brandon Inniss, Will Kakmarek. It's not pretty, but sometimes you got to get gross in Showdown. Not just to, get leverage on guys. It is to get leverage and maybe find the touchdown. If Sayin spreads out his touchdowns, he throws 4 touchdowns, 2 of them to Smith, 1 to Tate, and then 1 to one of these other cheap guys. Maybe that's enough to make it work that way. And like I said, they're gross, but it helps you avoid dupes too. It's like a more of an all or nothing approach. There's going to be a lot of dupes in this game because of just where the usage goes on either team and how big of a favorite Ohio State is. So maybe that's where you get different. And then kickers, if we do get a sloggy defensive battle, which is not out of the question here, I don't mind a kicker on either side. Fielding, obviously, being on the favored team, projected to score more points, seems like he will have more opportunities to get points. However, field goals are worth more than extra points, and we've seen Ohio State be okay giving up field goals, like a bend but don't break. Not that they gave up a ton of points, but 10 points from Davis might be enough on this slate at just 4,400. In terms of structure, I think you're going to see a lot of 4-2 Ohio State captain builds, a lot of 5-1 Ohio State captain builds, and regardless, a lot of Ohio State in the captain spot. So you can get different by playing Miami, but obviously it comes with some risk in a game like this. Let's move on to Thursday, the 3-game slate of the CFP, Oregon and Texas Tech. The first one on the board, and the lower seed is favored. Dante Moore crushed in the first round, but Tech is obviously a different team than James Madison. I do think if there's an offense that can crack the code, Oregon is going to be on that short list. And Moore, like I said, obviously showed his upside against James Madison. And if he can run in a touchdown and throw for 2 or 3 more, 7,700 is not too much to ask. And with a 27-point implied team total, it does seem like the books feel like Oregon's going to be able to score some points. And on a slate where a lot of the points are going to be in this last game here below, maybe we see some lowered ownership on Moore and you get a little bit of leverage. Now, I don't know that I see that necessarily, but if he comes in lower owned than the rest of the quarterbacks, I'm certainly interested. Now, last week in this running back room, Noah Whittington played less than Davison and about the same as Hill, but that may have been by design. Oregon controlled the game, even though the Dukes covered, and the final score looked maybe a little bit different than how the entirety of the game went. I do think we could certainly see more Whittington here, but I would not be surprised to see all three again. All three are viable on a small slate. We get these 3-game slates. You need to get a little bit weird. Don't be afraid to play, these running backs. You don't get much of a discount with Davison, but he certainly looks like he would be RB2. But if we get some De'Aaron Hill inside the 20, inside the 10, and he gets a touchdown or two, again, at 4,600, you're just looking for value and ways to avoid dupes on smaller slates like this and maybe fit in some more combinations of expensive guys that you wouldn't otherwise get if you didn't play a $4,600 running back. The wide receiver room is interesting. Kenyon Sadiq and Jamari Johnson had the most snaps last week, and they could certainly continue running 12 personnel for the Ducks, and it would not surprise me at all. And that just puts those guys on the field more. So it's not necessarily about how many targets they got. It's just the opportunity to be on the field. And Sadiq, he does seem like the most consistent guy on this team. Now, DeCorian Moore, in his return, did have the 3rd most snaps of the wide receivers. But Malik Benson and Jeremiah McClellan have just been really good. And you get a discount with McClellan, too. So while I do think DeCorian Moore is still the alpha, that doesn't necessarily always translate to DFS production. Just because you're the best player on the field doesn't always mean you get fantasy points. It's just the fact of the fantasy world that we live in. And then Gary Bryant, we might see some increased usage from him. He only had a few snaps last week, but he was also coming back from injury. So that just throws another wrench into it. And all of this, what this kind of points me to is that Dante Moore is going to have a lot of weapons on the field and a lot of different ways he can go with the ball. So it kind of comes back to Dante Moore for me, but with Oregon being favored in this game, if they do get up early, we know they like to run the ball, and I don't think they'll be afraid to do it against Texas Tech. Now, if this game stays competitive, it could be a different story. But I like Sadiq. I like Benson. If Benson does get steam because of his last game or just his increased usage, I don't mind taking a shot on any of these guys, really. On the Texas Tech side, Baron Morton's fine. It's a tough matchup. I don't know how strong you would consider him if it was a 12-game slate, but he definitely creeps into view when you're talking about a 3-gamer. And again, if Texas Tech gets down and they need to throw more, certainly opportunity. It's just a matter of, is he getting the passing touchdowns? He's probably going to need it in this game. The running backs still have a pretty even split in terms of snap share. But if we look at the conference championship, Dickey just got more touches than Jacoby Williams. You can honestly play both, though, on this slate and hope touchdowns just funnel through them when Texas Tech does score. If it goes to Dickey and Williams, they'll be just fine playing both of these guys, especially after James Madison just ran for more than 5 yards a carry against the Ducks. I've said it a lot already, and it's probably going to come out of my mouth again just because it's the nature of how this slate plays out. There's going to be tough matchups for everybody. There's a reason these teams are in the quarterfinals. So we have to play somebody, and it can't just all be you can overstack the last game where the shootout's going to be, but I don't know how different that's going to get you from the field if you're looking to take down some of these GPPs. Back to Texas Tech, though, these wide receivers are pretty much as they have been all season. Coy Eakin had the great game against BYU. That could increase his ownership and leave leverage spots elsewhere. Caleb Douglas, I do think, is still wide receiver 1. Reggie Virgil's certainly capable of being wide receiver 1, and he might be on a lot of other teams. And Terrence Carter's on the field, and he's definitely involved enough to consider. And you're getting a couple of guys that are going to be on the field a lot in the mid 4Ks. So I'm never going to complain about that at the wide receiver position. Just Tech has shown that they will spread the ball out. And, once in a while, we'll see games funnel to one or two of these guys. But really, it's the running backs on the Texas Tech side that I think have the best opportunity here. The biggest spread of the slate, Alabama and Indiana. Alabama coming in as the dogs. Ty Simpson just hasn't done anything to wow us for the most part this year. And if Alabama can't get this running game going, it's just so much easier for defenses to key in on Simpson and the passing game. Now, Indiana is going to be without Stephen Daly, who's second on the team in quarterback hurries and has 4 sacks. He's the guy who hurt himself celebrating after the conference championship victory. So it could have some impact. I do think Indiana has enough depth that it won't be maybe as big of a deal as it's being played out just because of the nature of how the injury happened. But certainly something to keep in mind at the very least. And I already mentioned it a little bit, but Bama just continues to show the inability to run the ball. Daniel Hill did have the most success against Oklahoma and had a score, so maybe some leverage there if we're going to see him get lower ownership. Technically, the RB2 on the team, but I don't know if there is an RB1 on this team. Jam Miller could certainly be healthier. And then the other thing to consider with Bama is that Kevin Riley's going to be back, and he should be into the rotation in some capacity. But I would say these guys are more leverage plays than anything else. It's not necessarily about what has happened this season. It's the guys that are going to be on the field and how you can get your lineups different. Now, I don't love it. I really don't. Not against this Indiana defense. It's just allowing 2.9 yards a carry this year. So I don't like it. But I don't think anybody's off the board on a 3-game slate, especially with the talent these teams have. I just think maybe the position group I like the least is the Alabama running backs out of everybody on the slate. The wide receiver room, you'd never guess, but the number 1 team in the country has a pretty good pass defense too. Just 7 touchdowns through the air given up by Indiana this year, and no more than 1 in any game. Tough matchup there. I said it again. Jeremy Bernard didn't do much against Oklahoma. I expect Bama to try to get him more involved. It was Lazir Brooks who had the huge game. Ownership might follow him because of it, especially since he's sub 4K. But he had the 2 touchdown game. He's had the upside, I think, all season, and he's finally shown it in the first round of the CFP. And then Isaiah Horton led the team in targets with 8 against Oklahoma. So the opportunity is certainly there for him. And at 3,500, I wouldn't be surprised to see him catch some steam as a value play as well. Ryan Williams, and maybe it's finally the week for him. I just don't love it because he's underwhelmed us and been a letdown for most of the season. But again, if we get him at just 5,600, which last year, if you would have asked, it would be completely abnormal. I don't know how many people are going to go there, and just any spot you can get a little bit of leverage and still be able to build lineups that you mostly like. And I say mostly because a lot of lineups are going to have a gross piece or two just with how the slate plays out. If you're going for that all or nothing approach, don't be afraid to get too uncomfortable. And Ryan Williams is certainly uncomfortable. On the Indiana side, Mendoza is expensive, the most expensive guy on the slate. So you're asking for a little bit more from him, and he hasn't really shown a ceiling against tough defenses, but maybe that lowers his ownership a little bit too. And heck, Oklahoma threw for 300 yards on Bama. There's no reason that Indiana can't. So he's, again, everybody's on the radar. I keep saying it. It's maybe a tick, a verbal crutch, not a tick, a verbal crutch, we'll call it. What I do like is these running backs. Hemby and Black get a decent split, which I say decent because it's a running back by committee, but both of them had mid-teens and carries against Ohio State. And, man, they love pounding the rock. Now, LT Overton is back for Alabama on the defensive line, But I do think this is a chance for the Hoosiers to just continue to pound the rock again and again and again. And we know Sigs likes to run the ball. Even if they fall behind, they continue to run the ball. So the usage opportunity is really what I'm interested with these guys. A different situation than the Tech running backs, but similar in the sense that I think both are viable on this slate. And I don't think it's too crazy to play them together. On the wide receiver room, Omar Cooper says he's feeling much better, so we should see that 1-2 punch again with him and Surratt. But that 1-2 punch comes with a little bit of an interesting caveat because Charlie Becker has really inserted himself into this rotation and playing a big role in this offense. Now, he had a big game in the conference championship as well, but was that because Cooper was dealing with back spasms, or is it because he really is becoming one of Mendoza's favorite targets? I think it could honestly go either way, but at 4,400, he's a guy I'm not afraid to take a chance on. So I would imagine just because of his box score in the conference championship game, he'll probably catch some steam as far as ownership. It is a little bit more difficult to project him with the full core of wide receivers back. But Cooper, Surratt, Becker, and maybe you take a disgusting shot on EJ Williams, even though he's really been hit or miss, and most of his success has come with some of these guys either dealing with injury or not playing completely. The game that could certainly get a lot of eyes on it from a DFS perspective, A, because it's the highest total on the slate, B, Georgia is the only team with a team total over 30, and C, because the last time these two teams played, it was a 43-35 shootout. Georgia won that game. I think it's proof that this game could go either way. Now, how much did Lane Kiffin have to do with that? Tough to say. Did you count how many times they said his name last week? It's probably going to happen again this week. Trinidad Chambliss didn't seem to have too many issues racking up points against this Georgia team. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns, but I think his upside for 2 rushing touchdowns is there every single week. He can throw the ball once they get inside the 10-yard line. They're not afraid to run quarterback draws. So I think that upside is super enticing, especially if you're looking at like Trinidad Chambliss at $8,500 discount from Fernando Mendoza. Chambliss, I wouldn't be surprised to see as the highest owned quarterback on the slate, probably competing with his counterpart in this game. Kewan Lacey, always a volume play. Only 12 carries the last time these two teams met, but he also found the end zone twice, and he added a few receptions to boot. So if Ole Miss can move the ball like they have all season and like they did against Georgia in the first game, the touchdown upside for both Chambliss and Lacey is absolutely there. These wide receivers, they all have a really high ceiling. In the first round, we saw it with Stribling, Deuce Alexander, and Daquan Wright getting a lot of the attention, but Wallace was still out there plenty. And all 4 got a solid target share in the first matchup against Georgia. So I could see it going 1 or 2 of these guys with how cheap they are. There's always opportunity. Even Caden Lee, like everybody on your screen has potential here. Caden Lee and Winston Watkins, I don't want them to feel like I'm leaving them out because these guys are all going to be on the field. And if they're all going to be on the field and this game shoots out again, there's going to be opportunity there. And Caleb Odom is questionable, which doesn't seem like huge news, but it just means more snaps for like Daquan Wright. We might see Trace Buckler and Luke Haas. Those guys would be extreme, disgusting dart throws. But what it tells me is that there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 more targets to be split out between these guys. And we could honestly see a situation where all 6 of these guys get 5 targets. And if we get the ones that score the touchdowns or the ones that get the big plays, that it could spread out ownership on these guys. Now, maybe ownership gets steamed up a little bit just because people see these prices, they see this game total, and they see the last game. Certainly possible. But mixing and matching these guys, I like Ole Miss a lot in this game. But I like Georgia a lot too. Georgia guys are going to be in good spots because Ole Miss is more suited for shootouts than they are to stop teams with their defense. Gunnar Stockton, a dual threat, had an absolute monster game against the Rebels. Almost 40 points, if I recall, and he's got 30-point upside in basically every game unless he's playing Georgia Tech. So at 8,100, certainly high on my radar here. Nate Frazier is getting the snap share, although we do need to remember the last game was a few weeks ago, and it was Chauncey Bowen's first game back. So while it does seem like Frazier is still RB1, we could see more of a split here. Frazier did have 17 carries against Ole Miss in the first game, but Bowen still had 10. So I think if it's a matter of saving $700 and getting to another play that you really, really like, I don't mind taking a shot on Bowens over Frazier, especially if we see Frazier come in with higher ownership. But I think both are in a good spot here. Zachariah Branch has been a stud, and he's still priced at just $5K. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's mattered if it's a 3-game slate, an 8-game slate, a 12-game slate. Zachariah Branch is somewhere between like 4,800 and 5,800. And it does continue to baffle me, but here we are. So definitely somebody that I like on this slate. Now, maybe the biggest news on the slate, Kobe Young was listed as probable on the initial report, and now he's off the report. So Kobe Young is active. You could call this a revenge game, nay, a redemption game. It was this game in the regular season that he had his leg injury just a few snaps into the Ole Miss game, and there was fear that he was going to be missed for the entire season. I don't know if he's going to get full run in this game. It feels like they're going to put him out there and he's going to have a big play just for the storyline, the narrative. I love a good narrative. And at 3,300, even if he has like 65% of what his normal workload would be, at 3,300 is a steal for Kobe Young. And I don't think anybody's going to be a stranger to what he can do if they know college football. So another guy, I wouldn't be surprised if we get some steamed up ownership. Now, we can't steam everybody, right? So if I think a lot of these guys have potential to get steamed, that just means somebody's going to be left behind. So there's definitely still some leverage opportunities with that. One big question mark with the return of Kobe Young, though, is what is that going to do to Noah Thomas? He did see increased run after the Young injury, and he was dealing with some back spasms in the conference championship, but it seems like he's cleared to play as well. It's a little bit tougher a click with Kobe Young back, but again, we don't know exactly what the split is going to be, what the usage is going to be with Young coming back from injury and Thomas coming back from injury. We could see a good deal of them both, or maybe one of them takes the reins and just sees the field a lot more. And then we can't forget about Dylan Bell. He's still be involved as well. And it sounds like 4-star freshman Ethan Barber will be available, the tight end. Now, I don't know that he's necessarily playable, but what that does is it just adds to the tight end rotation, and guys like Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky probably take a hit. But what I love about this Georgia team is they're all cheap. But I know I'm not alone in that. So people are going to see these price tags and see this point total and think, all right, it's, Stockton's expensive, Chambliss is expensive, but look at how easy it is to stack them with their wide receivers. Maybe you go super heavy on this game to get a little bit different, or maybe you do some mini stacks and go a little bit heavier stack on one of these other games to get a little bit different. But all in all, a decent slate, some good contests on DraftKings. The structure is always going to leave some to be desired on those bigger contests. But like I said earlier, don't be afraid to get uncomfortable in a spot or two. That's really what sets you apart on these smaller slates, is finding those guys that maybe seem gross on paper, but not gross when they find the end zone and you're at the top of the leaderboard. But that's going to do it for the college football quarterfinal show. Just have fun watching college football. New Year's Day, hopefully you get the day off and you can just veg, lounge, watch college football. Watch college football in your underpants if you want to. But we're going to end, as we do every single show, with the big guys rule number 1, and that is college football is fun. Enjoy the process, enjoy the sweat, enjoy building your lineups. But again, most of all, enjoy the fact that we get to watch college football on TV and enjoy it and get to play college football DFS. And I know that's rule number 1, college football is fun, but the most important part of this close is to never take a day for granted. We never know when our last one's going to be, and we never get enough. But that'll do it for this week's college football quarterfinal show. I will see you in the streets this weekend. Let's go out there and ship one for the big guy.